Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty King Abdullah received at Al Husseiniya Palace an Arab ministerial team tasked with following up on the repercussions of a U.S. decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and move the American embassy to the Holy City. The team comprised the foreign ministers of Egypt, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, the UAE, and the Arab League Secretary General. His Majesty underlined the need to ramp up efforts and coordinate Arab positions to support the Palestinians in safeguarding their solid historic and legal rights in Jerusalem and their quest to set up their independent state with East Jerusalem as its capital. The issue of Jerusalem, he stressed, should be settled within the framework of a final settlement and a permanent peace agreement between the Palestinians and Israelis based on the two-state solution and according to international legitimacy resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative. The King also emphasized the importance of supporting the steadfastness of Jerusalemites and safeguarding the Arab identity of Jerusalem and Islamic and Christian holy sites in the city. His Majesty reiterated that Jordan, as custodian of Muslim and Christian holy shrines in Jerusalem, will exert utmost efforts to uphold its religious and historic responsibility to protect the holy places. Arab foreign ministers said that they will lead efforts for international recognition of a Palestinian state in the aftermath of a U.S. decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. The meeting of the six-member Arab Ministerial Committee on Jerusalem, chaired by Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates Ayman Safadi, is part of a process set up by the Arab League after its emergency meeting in Cairo last month. The ministers also discussed the possibility of holding an emergency Arab League summit ahead of the regular session, which is set to take place at the end of March. Speaking at a joint press conference with the Arab League chief following the ministerial meeting, Safadi said the Arab League would seek international recognition of a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. Safadi said that just as there was a political decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, the Arab League will strive to reach an international political decision recognizing the Palestinian state at the 1967 border with Jerusalem as its capital. According to international law, Safadi said, Jerusalem is occupied land. Arab League chief Ahmed Abul Ghaid said there was no alternative to the peace process, adding that an expanded meeting of Arab foreign ministers to discuss Jerusalem would be held at the end of the month. And on the sidelines of the ministerial meeting, Safadi held talks with Saudi Foreign Minister Adel Jubeir, in which they stressed their keenness to forge closer ties between the two kingdoms in various fields and to increase coordination to further enhance the distinguished relations between the two kingdoms to their highest levels. In addition to bilateral ties, the ministers agreed to continue coordination and consultation to address regional crises on the basis of achieving security and stability and protect the common Arab interests. In remarks to the press, Safadi and Al-Jubeir said they had agreed to work together to counter the U.S. decision and its repercussions and support the Palestinians in their quest to achieve their legitimate rights, including the right to freedom and to set up their independent state with East Jerusalem as its capital. After 2 years of heightened tensions between Germany and Turkey, the chill appears to be thawing. The foreign ministers of both countries agreed to pull out all the stops to improve ties that have soured due to disputes over Ankara's post-coup crackdown, the migrant crisis, and the arrest of German citizens and journalists in Turkey. Meeting in the German town of Goslar, Sigmar Gabriel and Mevlut Cavusoglu said they were keen to make amends and believed they could tackle recent escalations and tensions through dialogue. The United Nations Security Council meeting last night to discuss recent protests in Iran turned into criticism of the U.S. for requesting to meet on what some member states said was an internal issue for Tehran. Russia, China and France said the international community had no business weighing in. Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif ridiculed U.S. President Donald Trump over what he called the foreign policy blunder. The Security Council rebuffed the U.S.'s naked attempt to hijack its mandate, wrote Zarif on Twitter. Here's more.
Our colleagues believe that human rights have no place here. A UN Security Council discussion over the civil unrest that swept Iran turned into criticism of the Trump administration for summoning the meeting over what some members say is an internal issue for the Mideast country. The Russian and Chinese delegations said the meeting wouldn't do anything to help resolve the crisis, and that's no surprise. Russia is a close ally of Tehran. But fellow NATO member France also threw an apparent warning to Washington in stating the protests weren't the Council's jurisdiction, and that attempts to influence them from the outside would make the problem worse.
Aussi préoccupantes qu'elles soient, les évolutions de ces derniers jours ne constituent pas, en tant que telles, une menace à la paix et à la sécurité internationale. Mais en nous gardant de toute instrumentalisation de cette crise,
over a week has passed since anti-establishment protests first broke out across Iran, now in over 80 cities and many violent. At least 22 have been killed and over 1,000 arrested. France's criticism at the UN came as its president, Emmanuel Macron, hosted another NATO ally, Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan, in Paris. Erdogan has begun improving relations with Iran in recent months, despite supporting opposite sides in Syria's civil war.
U.S. President Donald Trump rejected questions raised over his mental health in a bombshell book describing himself as a very stable genius. Michael Wolff's book, released yesterday, Fire and Fury Inside the Trump White House, suggests even those close to Trump have questioned his capability. Taking to his favorite social media platform, Twitter, Trump dismissed the book, calling Wolff a loser. In another tweet, the president wrote, quote, "I went from a very successful businessman to top TV star to president of the United States on my first try. I think that would qualify as not smart, but genius, and a very stable genius at that." To sports, Liverpool's Brazil midfielder Philippe Coutinho is joining La Liga leaders Barcelona in a club record deal. Barca and Liverpool have reached an agreement worth $193 million that would see the player sign a 5.5-year contract. The fee will eclipse the $126 million Barca paid Borussia Dortmund for France forward Ousmane Dembélé. It would also see Coutinho become the second most expensive footballer ever, behind compatriot Neymar, who moved from Barcelona to PSG for $267 million. Barcelona expect the 25-year-old to fly out in time to be at their match with Levante at the new camp tomorrow. And finally, for a quick look at the weather, the kingdom will remain under the impact of the cold, wet air mass, accompanied by the depression. Fog and frost formation are expected past midnight in the Badia regions and hilly areas. As for tomorrow, though a slight rise in temperature is expected, it remains cold across the country. Amman can expect a high of 12 degrees Celsius, dropping down to 3 at night. Further south in the Gulf of Aqaba, moderate conditions prevail, with temperatures at 23 degrees during the day, sliding down to 7 at night. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Alia Tuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.